Now, the rest of the story. Lou kept trying to apologize, but everybody else at the recording session was laughing too hard to hear him. The engineer, the musicians, everybody. Anyway, there was no harm done. It was 1926 when you made recordings on a wax drum, so all you had to do to erase a bad take was to scrape the wax smooth and start over. By the way, I'd like you to meet a virtually unknown jazz band called the Hot Five. They included a trombone player named Kid Ory, O-R-Y, a banjo player named Johnny St. Cyr, a clarinet player who doubled on alto sax named Johnny Dodds, a singer named Lil who organized the group, and Lil's husband Lou, the young man who got the rest of them laughing that day. It was an accident, of course, his goofing up their February 26th recording of a tune called Heebie-Jeebies, and when it comes right down to it, the blame really belonged to recording engineer Miney Jones. It was he who had the nerve, or the sense of humor, to suggest that Lou try singing. Jones had written this Heebie-Jeebies tune himself right there in Chicago, had collaborated, he said, with a local musician named Boyd Atkins. The truth was they'd ripped it off from a couple of other guys, but this was a small-time deal, all of it a cheap, fast recording of a cheap, fast band playing a third-rate song that was hot only in that it was stolen. So, recording engineer and alleged composer Miney Jones hands this piece of paper to young Lou and says, "Sing it." And this will tell you how little judgment Lou has. He says, "Okay." And they start recording. Now remember, Lou has never, ever sung before, at least anywhere that anybody can recall. But he's got this long double chorus all written out on the page that he's holding, and the recording machine is rolling, so Lou gets through the first part all right. Not the prettiest thing you ever heard, but nobody cares. And then just as he's getting ready to sing the second part, Lou drops that piece of paper. Everybody looks up. The machine is still recording. Lou is mumbling something. Not the lyrics, of course, because he doesn't remember them. Now he is slowly bending down to pick up that sheet. He's pulling the microphone down with him. He's still mumbling incoherently. What he doesn't realize is that Jones is bending over at the same time, trying to help him. The two bump heads, and all the while Lou is going, buddy-da-doo-da-wada, frantically attempting to fill in the blanks until he can see that page again. But by the time Lou gets the lyrics in front of him once more, the song is over, and everybody is laughing hilariously. Now, don't ask me why they saved that recording, but because somebody did, two things happened. For one thing, the record itself, Heebie-Jeebies, in an era when 10,000 copies was phenomenal, Heebie-Jeebies sold 40,000 copies, and something else happened. A genuine American musical art form was born. For ever since Nervous Lou dropped that piece of paper and started mumbling, jazz singers all over the world have celebrated the day the words went away. They call that spontaneous, meaningless, yet delightful musical gibberish scatting, scat singing, the inadvertent invention of a 25-year young cornet player named Louis Satchmo Armstrong. Louis Armstrong. Now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. How do you pronounce his name? Do you call him Louis Armstrong or Louis Armstrong? People have debated the pronunciation of his name for decades, but on television appearances, Louis, I call him Louis, sometimes referred to himself as Louis and other times as Louis. Someone once asked Louis Armstrong how to pronounce his name. With a great big smile, he replied, "Doesn't matter to me as long as it's spelled right on the check." Now, scat singing is when a singer uses his or her voice as a melodic instrument rather than a speaking medium and improvises nonsensical sounds and syllables in music, like gibberish. There was an old adage in the New Orleans jazz scene which many still swear by: if you can't sing it, you can't play it. In Mr. Harvey's broadcast, he explained that Louis Armstrong accidentally invented scat singing when he dropped the lyrics to Heebie-Jeebies. Jelly Roll Morton, a popular ragtime and jazz pianist, band leader, and composer who was at his height of popularity in the beginning of the 20th century, said in an interview, "Scat is something that a lot of people don't understand, and they begin to believe that the first scat numbers was done by one of my hometown boys, Louis Armstrong, but I must take the credit away since I know better. The first man that ever did a scat number in the history of this country was a man from Vicksburg, Mississippi, by the name of Joe Sims, an old comedian." And from that, Tony Jackson and myself, Jelly Roll, and several more grabbed it in New Orleans and found it was pretty good for an introduction of a song. Tony Jackson and myself, Jelly Roll, were using scat for novelty back in 1906 and 1907 when Louis Armstrong was still in the orphan's home. In 1911, Al Jolson scattered in his recording of The Haunting Melody. Gene Green used scat singing in King of the Bungalows and several other songs that he recorded between 1911 and 1917. Another interesting song by Gene Green's to use scatting was his 1917 recording of From Here to Shanghai, in which he used faux Chinese scatting as a novelty. You couldn't get away with that these days. One of the first female singers to use scatting in a recording was Eileen Stanley in her 1924 recording of It Had to Be You. Don Redman and Fletcher Henderson scatted in their 1925 recording of My Papa Doesn't Two-Time, No Time. And of course, Louis Armstrong's recording of Heebie-Jeebies was recorded in 1926. Louis Armstrong may not have actually invented scat singing, but he certainly popularized it and set the foundation for it in popular music. He sort of set the ground rules of what scatting was and how it should be used in music. In an interview, Louis said, "I dropped the paper with the lyrics right in the middle of the tune, and I did not want to stop and spoil the record, which was moving along so wonderfully. So when I dropped the paper, I immediately turned back into the horn and started to scatting, just as nothing had happened. When I finished the record, I just knew the recording people would throw it out. And to my surprise, they all came running out of the controlling booth and said, 'Leave that in.' And as Mr. Harvey explained, Heebie-Jeebies became a huge hit." Following the success of the song, other artists began including scatting in their records. Another early hit to employ scatting was the Boswell sisters' inventive use of scatting in It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. Because of the Boswell sisters' recording, another up-and-coming singer from Newport News, Virginia, began creating her own scatting style. She later claimed to be the best vocal improviser jazz has ever had, and most critics agreed with her. Her name was Ella Fitzgerald. Cab Calloway used a humorous form of scatting in several of his recordings. He even recorded a song called The Scat Song in 1932. In the original Blues Brothers movie from 1980, Cab Calloway performed a live version of his 1931 hit Minnie the Moocher, in which he uses a call and response form of scatting with the audience. In the 1967 Disney film The Jungle Book, Louis Prima played the character of an orangutan named King Louie and performed the song I Want to Be Like You, in which he used scat singing. Steven Tyler, lead singer for Aerosmith, has used scat singing in several of their songs. At first, Steven Tyler used scatting as a way to explain to the other musicians his vision for the song, but over the years he began to incorporate scatting in the final recordings. Throughout the past century, hundreds of artists have used scat singing in their recordings. Although Louis Armstrong may not have invented scat singing, he was forever associated with it. He sang scat on records, in his live performances, and on television and in film, but it all started, for him at least, in his 1926 recording of Heebie-Jeebies. To hear this song, Heebie-Jeebies, click on the link in the description below. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching, and as Paul Harvey would say, good day.